You're listening to Cinema Rex. It is an Iranian film podcast. Episode 19, Bahram Beyzaie's Bashu, the Little Stranger. Bahram, how are you doing today?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm okay. The Leafs lost, so I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. I mean, by the time that this episode comes out, they will have lost for a long time.
Durud bar shoma dostan aziz. This is the Cinema Rex podcast, where we talk all things film, music, movies, television, acting, directing. I'm Kaveh Mohebi.
I'm Farhan Moradi.
How are you doing, Farhan?
Do you think that Drake and Kendrick beef will have been settled by the time that this episode comes out?
I don't know who either of those people are. No, I'm just kidding. Our guest today is a recurring guest, Rouzbeh Heydari. How are you, Rouzbeh?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your awesome podcast.
Welcome back to the show.
I love you guys and I love this show. So,
what have you been up to? You got a film coming out, right?
yes, I have a film coming out in June, releasing, I think June 7th. That's going to get a limited theatrical in Canada and the US and will be released across 60 countries all in one day on Apple TV, which will be fun. It's called 100 Lies. It's a musical drama.
Oh, I didn't know it was a musical.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like song and dance like Miss Saigon or something like that. But no, there was original music written and performed in the movie as it's about a musician.
Okay, cool. Yeah, nice. It's a good thing you clarified that because the first thing I thought when I saw you was this is the kind of guy who would be directing Miss Saigon.
Hey, but real talk, that was an amazing piece. Beautiful, beautiful piece.
Just for those who don't know, Rouzbeh Heydari is a Iranian-Canadian filmmaker based out of Toronto. He has made multiple feature films. He's directed TV. He's killing it out there. But yeah, TLDR, Rouzbeh is awesome. Filmmaker based out of Toronto.
I said, okay, yeah. So you requested being on this podcast specifically for this film. Why don't you introduce the film and tell us, I guess, what it means to you?
Bashu, the Little Stranger, Bashu Gharibe Kuchek is my favorite Iranian film. It just moves me in a way that I don't think many other pieces of cinema have. And, I was kind of like, just annoyingly gnawing at you two since you guys announced that you would be doing a podcast about Iranian cinema. I think even the first thing that came out of my mouth was not a response. It was just Bashu.
Yeah.
Bashu. And so I've been bugging you both of you, and I'm sure you've been so annoyed with me about it that I really want to get on the Bashu episode because it's my favorite piece.
I'm glad you did that because the thing I told Farn, we're making the list of movies that we want to cover this month and next month. Bashu is our most requested film from people who know that I have an Iranian film podcast. People just are like, Bashu, what about Bashu? When are you going to do Bashu? This is my first time seeing the movie.
Oh, wow.
I'd heard of the film. I knew of the film, but I was just like, man, this movie is out of nowhere our most requested film. And we'll break down why I think that is. Bahram Beyzaie. We haven't done a Beyzaie film yet. It's I've only seen, and I'm really curious about you, Rouzbeh. I'd only seen Downpour before this, or Akbar.
That's an amazing film.
Loved it. I really loved it. So this is my second entry into Beyzaie.
Beyzaie is, in my opinion, one of the masters of Iranian cinema. There's not many that can do it as well as Beyzaie has. I mean, it's deep, yet very much rooted in Iran and very much accessible, in my opinion. I mean, there's so much to it. Some call him the Kurosawa of Iran. I mean, he's bigger than that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that. He's also the low-key sort of like Iranian filmmaking OG in terms of internationally, you always get the Panahi Kiarostami name drops, right? But Beyzaie is like a little bit more like Iranians know him better. He's not, I don't think, as internationally acclaimed as like a Kiarostami.
I know, and that's sad. That saddens me. And he's Baha'i, right? So he's also had to deal with.
He's Baha'i?
Well, he's not Baha'i, but he comes from a Baha'i family. Farn, was this your first Beyzaie film?
It was, yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm really curious to know your thoughts. But with that, can we jump into a plot summary of Bashu, the Little Stranger? It is 1987 in the middle of the Iran-Iraq War. Following a young Afro-Iranian boy, Bashu, who loses his house and all his family after a devastating bombing in the Khuzestan province in the south of Iran. His parents dead, the terrified boy sneaks into a cargo truck that is leaving the area. He gets off the truck in the Caspian north of the country where everything from landscape to language is different. Eventually, he finds refuge on the farm of a Gilak woman, Nai, who has 2 young children of her own. Her husband is away, either fighting at war or looking for work. It's never confirmed. Initially, Nai tries to shoo Bashu away, but later takes pity on him and leaves food out for him. Being that Bashu speaks Arabic, while Nai and her children speak Gilaki, they have trouble communicating with each other. Although Nai is initially ambivalent towards Bashu and he is initially suspicious of her, they come to trust one another and Bashu becomes a member of the family, despite her receiving criticisms from their community and Bashu suffering the PTSD of the devastation of his hometown. The story unfolds as a new family structure is formed as they await the return of the family patriarch. It doesn't have a critical Rotten Tomato review because it just doesn't have enough reviews, but it has an audience score of 87%. So, Rouzbeh, I ask you, what did you think of Bashu, the Little Stranger?
Sorry, 1 sec. I'm getting like all choked up. Give me 1 second. Cause I'm like, it's been on all night and I've been like, it's just, I'm watching the images now as we're doing this. And 1987 was when I came to Canada, running away from bombs, right? Sorry, 1 second, man.
Dude, that's all right. I mean, you don't be ashamed. Emotions are good. Do you need a minute?
Yeah.
You want to take 5? All right, go. Go for it. Go
Just give me a
pace.
sec, dude.
Go drink some water. But as someone producing the show right now, if you want to cry, I mean, I'd be so glad if you did on mic. That'd be great.
This is Jerry Springer.
Yeah, I'd be like, yo, have you checked out the recent episode of Cinema Rex? We had a dude cry. That's how moved he was by a film. And you like put a promo of just like cuts of the crying together. Be like, in a very special Cinema Rex.
Thank you for bringing me back to life there, Kava. Thank you. But yeah, 1987 was the year that, I came to Canada with my mom and sister, running away from bombs, quite like Bashu was in this movie. One of the things that I love about this movie, besides the very human connection I have to the time and place that it takes place in the child, which is about my age when I came to Canada. Maybe Bosch was a little older in the movie, but I was 5 when I came here in 87. And, there's this one thing that the film explores besides the horrors of war and how it affects children and families is the very fiber and structure and fabric of Iran. Like, essentially you go from town to town in Iran or city to city, and people look different, they dress different, they talk different, you don't understand one another. But there is this sort of bond that has kept the people of Iran together.
Yeah.
Whether it's the poetry, the art, the music, the rituals and customs, and it's all explained in one of the last scenes of the movie when Bashu finally has his monologue, right, and speaks about this. We are all children of Iran, ... Yeah. But the few of the reasons why I love this movie is those that I just mentioned. And Susanna Taslimi. Come on, I mean, the performance she gives us.
Oh, yeah, really great.
Susanna Taslimi is incredible in this film. Like, rare performance, beautiful, stunning performance.
On the thing you said about like the multicultural and multi-ethnic aspects of Iran, I wanted to quote Sadaf, who, when I was talking to her about this film yesterday, said, it speaks to the diversity of Iranians, to the fact that like a character like Bashu can leave from the south and arrive in the north and has changed so much that he literally thinks he's in a different country.
Yeah.
Like everything about his surroundings and the culture and the language is so different, and the people and the way they look is so different that Bashu initially thinks he's not even in Iran anymore. So it speaks to like showcasing that diversity of Iranians. And of course, through everything but between Bashu and Nai being so different, from skin color to language to the culture they've grown up in, it's like really showcasing that diversity on screen in a really powerful and meaningful way. So I just wanted to echo what you were saying. Bahram, what did you think of Bashu, the Little Stranger?
I was disappointed. I actually was disappointed. I'm sorry, Rouzbeh. I can feel your heart breaking. I'm sorry. It gave me a lot of the same feelings that I had watching To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, that's another movie that a lot of people are like, oh, it's a classic, it's beautiful, it's great. But I felt icky watching it because I feel like a lot of I think the broad strokes of the movie are great. Like, I think that the setup is great. I think that the themes that it attempts to tackle are good themes to tackle in a film. But I just felt like the way that it was executed, I felt in some scenes felt a little exploitative. And after hearing some of the stories about the kid who played Bashu and like what ended up happening with him, it made me feel even worse. But we can get into it more. But yeah, just overall, I was actually pretty upset by some of the film.
But like, what would you expect to happen to the kid? I mean, these movies were made with no budgets. No one's making money off these movies. You know, it's not like How to Be. What was that Danny Boyle one, the millionaire one?
Slumdog?
Slumdog, yeah. Like, it's not like it's like a Danny Boyle movie with budgets to get these kids paid out and, you know, change their lives. Like, this is literal, like, movies made with duct tape and hope, man.
It comes back to, like, some of the criticisms that I have against Kiarostami and Panahi, too. And I think they're great filmmakers. I just think that sometimes these guys are, like, a little exploitative of people who are, like, oh, it's not an actor, it makes it more real, yada, yada, yada. And then they, like, move on and they basically abandon these people. And to me, it's like, okay, well, can you at least try to help foster a career for them, like connect them with some people? Like, if you're actually touched by these people and you think that they're beautiful, et cetera, at the very least, like, connect these people with resources that can help them and help their lives.
I think these guys didn't even have resources for themselves, dude. Like, he got it. He's like, he can't even go to Iran, man. So what resources?
Let's talk about the film first, and then we'll get to the nitpicks and what aged poorly. Because what I'm curious about is what you're talking about, Farn, is like sort of more maybe the controversies, but
yeah. I was just responding to what Rouzbeh said. We'll double back to it in behind the scenes.
Yeah, like, let's talk about the substance of the film outside of whatever's going on outside of the film.
Yeah, substance of the film, I felt like the broad strokes were good. The execution, I wasn't a fan of. And some of the blocking felt weird to me too. Like, there were times where I think for the sake of, like, making something feel, like, theatrical and artistic, there's a scene where Bashu is reading from the book. And I think that that's a beautiful moment. And I think having that moment is great. But the way that it's presented almost robbed me of the beauty of that scene, because the way it's blocked, all of a sudden it's like he's standing alone, and then from every direction outside of camera, like 5 kids like step up in perfect unison towards him, and it felt very fake, and it like took me out of the moment. That to me, it feels like a lot of like stage blocking, you know what I mean? Like something that you would see in a theater play, which I think works in theater. And a lot of movies from even like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s had blocking like that. So I just wasn't. And there's a lot of scenes that had theatrical blocking, not in the sense of like cinema theatrics, but like play theatrics that I felt bumped me a little bit. And it was just tonally, I got a lot of whiplash because there were tons of beautiful moments in the film. And then I had a lot of nitpicks. So that's my overall feelings of the film.
Rouzbeh, I will let you rest assured that I thought the film was a masterpiece and beautiful, top to tail. I think I could see some of the criticisms that Farhan might be alluding to with regards to the treatment of Bashu as a character, but I don't think it would be disingenuous to what is real about the culture and how people would react to that character within the context of the film.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
I will say that in the last scenes, specifically tonight, Rouzbeh, because I want to see his reaction, I completely teared up and it broke me. And I kind of want to do this a little bit more chronologically, so we'll get there. But like essentially in the final scene, I was in shambles. Yeah. Because of how moved I was and how powerful I thought the film was. So I will let you, Rouzbeh, tackle any of the nitpicks that Varun wants to take.
We'll get to them one by one. But I agree with you, Kava. I think it's a cinematic masterpiece. I don't think there's many movies that have affected me or a large population of people the way this movie has.
And there's stuff I want to talk to both of you guys about when we get to deeper analysis, because I feel like he's doing something no other filmmaker at the time had done in terms of portrayal of gender assumptions, like the role that women play in society, the role that men play, the idea of like tackling mysticism and like magical realism.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just go a little bit chronologically, and you guys jump around if you feel. But I want to talk about the very first opening image. It's Kaveh's opening image corner. The explosions, so palpable right off the first shot.
Yeah.
And my first note I made was like, there's fucking crazy stunt work in this too.
Yeah.
Like there's a woman who I assume was a man probably under that who's completely caught on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's his mother.
He means the stunt person was probably a
stunt
stunt man.
It probably wasn't it was probably a stunt man. I know it's his mother. And then like a man falling through a trap door, which I guess
That's
like,
his father, yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that my first thought was like, oh, that's cool. There's like some real stunt work in this for like an 80s Iranian film. And then he obviously gets there and he arrives, and the thing I'd mentioned about him ending up in the north. The first time we see Nai is a beautiful, that shot. It's become like an iconic image. Like she's covering her top of her hair and covering her mouth. Her eyes are so beautiful and they eviscerate you with the stare.
Can I point something out about that?
Yeah, please.
That's one of those things that like in the moment I was like, this is beautiful, but it feels like it doesn't fit the tone that we've been showing, because it's like it's showing it's very realistic. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's this shot that's like very choreographed almost. Like the way that she's putting on the veil.
I think he's playing with that, right? Like because you got to understand he also comes from a theater background.
For sure.
Which,
yeah.
And he's some of the strongest work he has is theater, right?
Yeah.
But I also think he plays with like exactly what you said, and I think that's one of the charms of his movies, right? Is this balance between okay, this is real, but this is a bit magical and theatrical and and but those are the parts I like about the film.
No, that's fair. I think it wasn't for me. You know what comp that I made while I was watching the movie? It feels sort of Zack Snyder-y. I don't mean the style of it. Hang on. Let me defend that. I don't mean that it was the Zack Snyder style of filmmaking. What I mean is it felt like there's this movie with tons of beautiful visual moments and with great broad strokes, but I just didn't feel tonal consistency with how those things were stitched together, personally. And I have that issue with Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder still has a lot of fans. And even with this movie, I felt like there were these visual moments that were beautiful and the broad strokes of the story were great, but the way that things were stitched together, like, just didn't work for me.
Rouzbeh, I'm so glad you are on this podcast with me, because I don't know how I would have been able to tackle this alone if he had said to me, Bashu is like Zack Snyder films, and then I would have been like, I don't know what to say. So Rouzbeh, take it.
I just think he's been working too hard on that beautiful mustache and losing sight of reality.
Okay, wait, Rouzbeh, what? Do you like Zack Snyder?
I don't watch too much Zack Snyder. Like, he's just not my type of cinema. Like, sure, I'll throw Zack Snyder on if I'm like, I need to veg out for a minute, but I would definitely not breathe him in the same sentence as Bahram Beyzaie.
and again, I'm not saying that it's the same style, nor am I saying that they tackle similar themes. I'm saying the experience of seeing beautiful visuals, great broad strokes, but like an inconsistent through line, that to me felt very...
I think after this podcast, I got to come sit with you for some days and just watch the catalog of Beyzaie and like almost Clockwork Orange you with it.
Maybe.
Just force you to watch it with me.
I'm worried that the next time I see you, you're just going to start like beating me down.
Well, listen, I want to say this in defense of Farhan and anyone who's listening who might be like this close to turning off the podcast. In defense of Farhan, Howard Stern made his like killing in the radio industry because the things he would say was either going to be fascinating to people, and the people who didn't find it fascinating absolutely hated it. And Farhan, if nothing else, is a man of conviction, and he will have it take whether or not you agree with it. You cannot say you've heard any other podcast reference Beyzaie being like a Zack Snyder film anywhere else. That's a take you won't hear anywhere else. So let us be the first. He's probably the first person in the world to have said that.
Yeah, I don't think I would have ever in my reality expected to even hear that.
Again, I'm not saying he's like Zack Snyder or his work is like Zack. I'm saying the experience of seeing beautiful visuals and like not connected very well together. That is the thing that I was like, it just.
Were you like upset when did you get into an argument with someone before you watched this
Right
film?
before,
What was your where was your head
I was
at
like
when-
very excited to see this movie, and I was like, I read the log line. I was like, this is a great premise. The opening scene, I was like, all right, this is like really interesting. I'm in. My family's from northern Iran, so I was like, I felt the connection there. And I've seen and heard people say, like Iranians say like really racist things about other Iranians. Do you know what I mean? And about darker skinned Iranians. So I was really excited to see how that was tackled in a film. But similar to how it's tackled in To Kill a Mockingbird, I felt like a lot of the criticisms and a lot of the portrayals of it was like low hanging fruit. And a lot of it was like,
we have to agree to disagree on this stuff, man.
I didn't even feel like like a character from him. It felt like he was like, oh, he's black. That's his character. He's a black kid with PTSD. That's his character.
No,
That's how it was presented. And I was like,
dude.
It felt really inappropriate and really exploitative.
I would beg to differ, man. I think you didn't watch the same movie we watched.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know about that, man.
The moment Nai locks him in the farm, just to push us forward through this,
Sure.
and me being completely out of context of not knowing what the film was about, you know, the first reveal that he's got demons of his family, not demons, but the ghosts. He's haunted by the ghosts of his family member. And then there's a recurring thing of being haunted by the ghost of his mother. When you first see that, it's the way it's shot. I think it's really masterfully shot. He's alone in the dark, and then you see a pair of hands next to him, and it pans up. And at first, I was like, "Oh my god, are there other people in there with him? Like, is she like taking because she like throws him in the farm and locks it?" And I don't know where this story's going. And then I realized quite quickly on that it's the mother. But the way Beyzaie uses the mother is actually like some of the closest things I've seen to Iranian horror.
Yeah,
because it actually feels like a horror movie, like something like the way M. Night Shyamalan might direct a ghost standing in the background. And it gave me chills, and it was super effective, in my opinion.
Off topic, and but if you're right on with that statement, because he does that in his other films as well. Like there's a film called Shayad Vakhti Digar, and when I saw that, I thought that was the closest we got to horror thriller in Iran.
Oh, cool! I got to see that.
And it's with same actress Susanna Taslimi is in it, and it's there's a layer of unsettling sort of themes and images in that film that really just get in under your skin. But same way with Bashu. Again, there are moments in this film where you're like, okay, this is kind of horror, and but in a very unique way, in a very, very unique way.
I actually thought because of how silent the scenes are with the ghost, it's not like a jump scare with like sound or noise. It's just there. It had this visceral effect of it really portrayed the PTSD he's feeling in a way that I hadn't seen really. Like, I really think it was one of the best portrayals of PTSD. Just the way that it's just the hauntingness of the ever-present ghosts in scenes you don't expect.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. Like I liked every time it showed up, it made me uncomfortable, and it was like, and that's a compliment. It was like seeing it, and you're like, oh damn, like that's his mom. And the first few times you see it, you're like, what is that? Is that like death? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
looming over him, and then he calls out for his mom, and then you realize, oh, it's the ghost of his mom. And you also see his dad and his sister later too.
Yeah, and that's almost like the sort of mental effects that PTSD can have on someone, but I think it also talks about the physical effects of it. Like I think a third of the way into the movie, he gets physically sick, and it's not quite clear whether his sickness is viral or is this because of his trauma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he gets physically sick to a point of near death in the film. Bashu does, right?
Yeah. He has like a fever and she has to like find a doctor for him.
I didn't like the portrayal of that either.
but it's listen, like from someone who's like been bombed on as a kid.
Yeah.
I've experienced those physical PTSD feelings, so I totally relate to that. Like, I've had people tell me I sweat and scream in my sleep at night. You know what I mean? And I'm shaking. So I've experienced the exact physical sort of effects of PTSD in a way that is portrayed in this movie. Again, another like deep connection I have. I think, you know, it might also be that as well. The way it's portraying it, it's very familiar to me.
Yeah, in that scene, she says a motherless child is dying, and I thought the term like a motherless child is so effective. It's not that just a child is dying. She's like, help, I need a doctor. A motherless child. It's like the fact that he's an orphan. It speaks to his vulnerability as a character. Like he has no one if not Nai. If he doesn't have Nai, he's just empty. Like he's void of any human connection.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for Nai, if he'd shown up to that village, they would have
Everyone would have locked their doors to him.
Rejected him, and you would have had to live out in the woods, in the forest, you know, like essentially becoming a feral child. But now he takes him in, yeah. I also think the images of his mother coming behind Nahi is like, sort of like, I hate to sound cheesy about this, but like her beyond the grave being like, pointing him to Nahi, being like, this woman will take care of you. You know what I mean? Like it sort of reinforces who Nahi is to Bashu.
Well, there's the more direct pointing too of when he's lost the second time when he runs out and she's looking for him in the rain, and Bashu's mother's ghost is standing there pointing in the direction he ran, and she almost stops as if she's like felt it, but she doesn't look directly at it, and then runs in the direction she's pointing. Again, super effective.
I get chills, man. I'm getting chills speaking about this.
Yeah.
What you were saying earlier about him being a Baha'i, or even if he comes from a Baha'i family, the idea of death for us is like there's a quotation that we have, which is death is a messenger of joy. So that idea of when he's first seeing death and he's like getting scared and he like doesn't know how he should react to seeing his mom. Is she coming to take him? Is she haunting him? Whatever. But she's actually like guiding him towards Nai and towards joy and towards life and love. I think that ties back into that idea of death being a messenger of joy.
That's pretty cool, man. That's great that you would draw that from it, because I don't know to the depth that you do about the Baha'i faith, but that's really cool.
There's this idea too that the fact that he's a war-torn orphan and, you know, like she's saying a motherless child is dying. It's Beyzaie saying, in a sense, with regards to society, we have to become each other's mothers and fathers. Like let's become, it's like this unification that's required.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about this idea of like collectively as society, we have to become one another's mothers. One another's mothers. I'm rapping now.
Kendrick and Drake got to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? Okay, can we talk about language in the film? Because I thought it's okay. There's the moment. I'll just like forecast it. The kids are bullying him. The school book drops out, and he starts reading in Farsi. And this becomes like a unifying thing to all of them, because Nai and her family speak Gilaki, right? He speaks Arabic, but they've all learned school in Farsi. They've all been educated in Persian. So that becomes this moment of unification, not just between Nai, like we can like communicate through this language together, but also like the bullies stop bullying him. It becomes like he's one of us. What'd you guys? Well, let me start with Farhan. What'd you think of that moment first? Then Rouzbeh, you can fight him.
Okay, I was honestly a little confused. If he's learned it, then he's probably already learned Farsi.
Yeah.
And these kids are learning Farsi.
Yeah.
So he probably already knows how to read Farsi, and that's how he's able to read this. And then in later scenes, we see that he's already like able to communicate with like a first grade level of Farsi, right? But the thing that bothered me about that was like 3 scenes earlier, when they're like pointing at things and saying words in their native languages, nobody thought to try to just speak to the other person in Farsi, knowing that they're in Iran and knowing that that's the universal language within the country. And yeah, I understand he's a kid. Maybe he didn't think to try it, whatever. Nai's a full-grown adult. Nai should have tried to be like, hey, let's try to speak in Farsi. And it particularly bothered me because I really like that other scene where they're pointing at things and like sharing their what it is in their language. And so I was like, I thought we were going to go into like, oh, they're going to bond over their languages and learn a little bit of each other's languages, and that's how they're going to communicate. But then like 2 scenes later, it's like, oh no, everybody can speak Farsi. I was so mad.
Rouzbeh?
I mean, you have to look at a movie in different ways. I don't know. Like you're taking quite a literal approach to this film, right? Whereas I think you're missing the poetry of the movie. And why would she think to speak to him in Farsi? He looks like an alien to the village, and the village looks like aliens to him. Like they've never seen people like this before. And I think it would take them a minute or two to figure out, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, that we could communicate in this common language.
See, that bothered me too, though.
Why though? I mean, listen, I've been to villages all throughout Iran. Okay,
Yeah.
all throughout, and I've even spoken Farsi, but they still won't speak back to me in Farsi. You know what I mean? Like, they speak their dialects. People, you know, like I've been to quite a few places in Iran, and it is like this. Like they're not going to be.
Look, I buy that, and I bought that up until that moment. The problem is, in that moment, we find out that all of them can speak Farsi.
Yeah.
Think about this logically. You're in a situation where you're in Iran. You know that the universal language of the country is Persian. And we can't be like, oh, these are rural people who don't know anybody. No, they're educated. We have now shown you these are educated people. They know how to speak Farsi. They know how to read and write in Farsi, right? So you have to buy that. You buy that these people know. Those people would know to, at the very least, try it. And you can still get that moment where they're like teaching each other things in their own languages. And then maybe it's like, oh, whatever, this in Farsi or this or that. You know what I mean?
I think you're missing the point, man.
I still love
really think you're missing the point of the film. Like this, you're taking.
I'm not an idiot. I understand the point of the film. He even says we're all children of Iran. Like, it's not like it beats you over the head. We're all children of Iran. I understand that, and I love that. I genuinely thought that was a great moment. The way that it's presented, I felt was like it undermined some of the earlier scenes, and I can't forgive it for that.
To criticize Beyzaie like this, I can't even sit through this, man.
This isn't the first time I've torn apart a classic. I tore apart Camus like 3 episodes ago, and he's like the god of modern philosophy.
To sit on a podcast about Iranian cinema and to tear apart Beyzaie, I think that is a fatal move. Just saying. I think that is gonna hurt.
My
you.
DMs are open. You can email us at cinemarexpodcast@gmail.com and let me know why you think I'm an idiot.
For what it's worth, I loved the movie and thought it was a masterpiece. So, I mean, if anyone's offended by what Farhan's saying, 50% of the podcast hosts loved the movie and thought it was a masterpiece.
And your guest of the podcast thinks it's probably the best Iranian movie ever made.
Never been more happy to have a guest on the show right now. Rouzbeh can fight all the battles. I'm tired. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, can we please just trying to get through more of the plot before we move on? One thing I wanted to mention to what you're saying, Farhan, is I think it's really great how Bashu is, you discovered quite early on, he's a really intelligent guy too. He's so smart, so educated, and whether it's classical education, academia, or whatever, he not only can read really well, but his math skills, like the fact that they're in the marketplace, the bazaar scene, and he's like, he shortchanged you. He owes you like 5 more toman or whatever it was, right? And then you later on see he's sort of like working like this. I think it's an important aspect of the film that Bashu is an intelligent kid. It's like if this kid had been given another lease in life, this guy would probably grow up to prominence. He probably could be a doctor. He could be a lawyer. He could be something important. You know, I that choice I really loved. Seeing that he wasn't just, he like probably almost had like an innate skill of intelligence, you know, more than even what his value or what he was afforded in life.
And it's like photographic, right? Because she's, when she takes the money, she's not just like counting it.
Yeah.
He like sees it and instantly he's like,
yeah.
He's shortchanging, which I loved.
I mean, a lot of the kids from that generation, though, I think it speaks to, because, you know, everyone did have decent education growing up, you know, but that war really, you know, for many reasons, they call our generation Nasl Sukhte, which means the burnt generation, right? So, but I think this war was one of those reasons, because a lot of the opportunities, you know, in a normal world got taken away from kids of war, you know? And I think that this film scenes like that does do a really good job of being like, look, these kids are just as smart and just as vibrant as any other kid in the world, but this is how war affects children. And it's not a good thing, you know, and I love the anti-war sentiment of this film. It is a film about war, but you don't see, you know, the glory that most other films about war portray, like, you know, hoisting the flags or, you know, gunning down the enemy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not about that. It's just about this is how bad it does to kids.
And it shows you that immediately, right? Like, as soon as the movie opens, you're just like, here's homes exploding, a person on fire, someone drops through the floor, and here's a child running for their life.
Oh my God. And remember the scenes where he sees, it's so chilling. Remember those scenes where he's just like looking out, he's in the green forest of Gilan, like he's in the greenery, but he's looking out and he sees his landscapes, like the sand, the deserts, and him and his mother and father are walking
and his sister
together. You know what I mean? It's, whew. I mean, that's some pretty heavy stuff, right?
The cool thing about that vision that he has is when he has that vision, it incorporates Nai into that vision, which throughout the film, he keeps seeing his family here. But in that moment, he sees his landscape and his family and himself, and Nai is transposed into there. It almost felt like he was like bringing Nai into his life at that point. Like they were getting to a point in their relationship where it's like, oh, she's been bringing me into her life. Now I'm bringing her into my life. See, I can praise the movie too.
I really love Nai's strength and command within the community too. I thought that was so interesting to watch. Like the way she treats the guests who are insulting the boy when they're in their house. She kicks them out of their house. The way she handles herself in the market when she's selling goods, she's not going to be talked down to or like steamrolled. She's not a second-class citizen in this community, and it shows right from the thing. She's their peer. You know, when Bashu falls in the water, she runs out to get the net to get him out, and all the men are just kind of idly standing by watching, like they're like kind of paralyzed. Watching, like, oh my God, I really like that characterization of Nai because she's in terms of like the pantheon of strong, powerful women in Iranian cinema, I'd put her up there. One of them.
She's definitely the strongest we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Like by far.
And her character has to be in this film, right? She's literally, she's not widowed, but her husband is off fighting, right? And so she's alone with 2 kids. And now a stranger shows up to her door that doesn't look like anyone else in the community. So she has to stand her ground. She has to be tough. She doesn't have a choice. In order for her to, you know, be able to live her life, she, you know, either fortunate or unfortunately, she has to be the tough person she is in this film.
And what's really cool too, and I want to get in this when we get to deeper analysis, but when she gets sick, as the eldest in the house now, Bashu is becoming the de facto man of the house too.
Yes.
Because he's taking care of the chores. He's sort of like doing all the roles she did. And it's this really interesting interplay of this is now in a weird, not Freudian way, but they're like the man and wife of the house. It's like the structure of the household is he's now head of the household while she's sick.
Well, especially because with war, oftentimes the eldest son would have to be put in that position where they're now the man of the house, right? But her kids are too young for that.
Can I just say 2 more things about the film before we move to behind the scenes and trivia?
Yeah.
The kids' dance number, there was a part when he starts dancing and the kids dance along with him. And that play sort of evolves into like a bit of like horseplay. And it kind of evolves into like war play, for lack of a better term. And I thought that was a really powerful moment because Nai comes and stops them and scolds the kids for bullying them, but she also scolds Bashu. And it's this like almost moment of like the transgenerational trauma of like kids adopting war-like practices from their parents. It's like that thing, which one of you guys said that war is felt by the children the most. They're adopting the mannerisms and behavior of wartime people. And that's what Nai is getting upset about. It's not just that the horseplay, it's that the horseplay mimics and reflects war, right? I really like that point. I just wanted to call that out. Don't know if you guys had the similar feeling or... If that resonated with either of you.
Oh, no. I feel exactly what you're saying, man.
Yeah.
But I love that she calls Bashu out as well.
Yeah,
you
that's
know what I mean? Like, she doesn't take it easy on him. Like, no, you can't be involved with this nonsense either, kid.
Yeah.
You know, and to, you know, at first when you see that, you're like, oh, she's scolding this poor orphan, but think about it for a second, and it's coming from a place of total love.
And then the last thing I was going to say was, for an Iranian movie in the 80s shot in a small village, I thought it actually really follows a pretty standard modern Hollywood structure to its complement. Like, it's very Save the Cat in its beats, to the point where it even has a Dark Night of the Soul, and it has an All Is Lost moment towards the third act. Like, you could take Seth Rogen movies and parallel these beats to it, because Seth Rogen always has like best friends, things are good, things are finally working out, something goes wrong, the best friends are never going to talk again, third act structure, they're like, and this is like, Bashu follows those beats pretty clearly. Like, it's got to Save the Cat structure. So
I just want to point out to the audience that it was ludicrous for me to make a comparison to Zack Snyder, but it's totally acceptable for Kaveh to make a comparison to Seth Rogen.
Behind the scenes in trivia. According to Hamid Nafisi, who is the author of A Social History of Iranian Cinema, the film's release was delayed by 3 years due to Beyzaie's refusal to make some 80 changes demanded by official censors, likely due to its anti-war message, but also its bold transgression of codes of modesty. The film was released after the political climate had sufficiently changed to great public response. However, authorities were apparently still sufficiently unhappy with Beyzaie to prevent him from leaving the country in September 1992, and he wasn't able to attend TIFF, where Bashu was slated for screening.
Was this the first Iranian film to play at TIFF?
I don't think so.
No. Kiarostami had films.
Kiarostami had a film at TIFF prior to this, yeah.
Bashu, do you know what the name means? Arabic name meaning optimistic, joyful, or cheerful.
Nice.
Aww.
It's fitting.
Aww.
When Nai becomes sick and the villagers won't help, Bashu performs a Zar ceremony. Zar refers to an African belief that the body has been possessed by an evil wind, and in order to be cured, a ceremony involving drumming and chanting must take place to subdue the wind and return the afflicted to health. It was brought to Iran by Africans, many of them through the slave trade.
Yeah, and when I was performing sort of live electronic music, my stage name was Zar.
That's cool, yeah.
That's cool.
An exorcism through dance. And, you know, I became familiar with this ceremony because I have family in Bandar Abbas, and I've spent some time in the islands in the Persian Gulf, like Qeshm. They perform this as well there.
That's cool.
And it does come from Africa, yeah.
This was the first Iranian film to make use of the northern language of Iran, Gilaki, in a serious context rather than comedic relief.
Mm-hmm.
So it was every time before that, Gilaki was like kind of made to like make fun or whatever. But Susan Taslimi, who plays Nai, is Gilaki herself. And this is the first time the film was used to like treat that language seriously and not like as a, I don't know how like some films might do like a hick accent or something, I guess.
Yeah. Mad props.
Bashu the Little Stranger was voted best Iranian film of all time in November 1999 by a Persian movie magazine called Picture World in a poll of 150 Iranian critics and professionals. So 99 considered best Iranian film all time.
I second that.
And so we can add Rouzbeh's vote to that list. And of course, as we mentioned, the film is set during the war between Iran and Iraq, lasting nearly 8 years, which commenced with the Iraqi invasion of Iran on the 22nd of September, 1980, and ended on the 20th of July, 1988. The Iran-Iraq War has been called the longest conventional war of the 20th century and cost 1 million casualties. This film was produced by Qanun, the Institute for Intellectual Development of Children and Young Adults, which we know from Kiarostami's films.
Mm-hmm. Beyzaie was making movies with them before Kiarostami was. Yeah, short films. Kiarostami, I think, did the feature first.
And last thing I have is Beyzaie worked with Susan Taslimi a few times. What was the film you had mentioned, Rouzbeh?
Shayad Vakhti Digar.
Maybe some other time.
And then also The Ballad of Tara in 1978.
Was she not in Marg Yazgird as well?
Yeah, I think she's been. Well, yeah, I think they work together. They're frequent creative collaborators.
It almost feels like she was his muse at one point.
Yeah, this film made me really, and reading about Beyzaie really made me excited to watch Stranger and Fog.
Oh yeah,
I haven't seen that, but reading about that, I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I really want to see all of Beyzaie's films now. I've only seen this in Ragbar.
Anytime you want to watch one of those movies, Kaveh, I'll just invite me over. We'll watch it on. I will be there.
For sure, 100%.
Like within.
We'll bring Farhan too.
Yeah, we will Clockwork Orange you to Beyzaie's catalog.
100. Any other behind the scenes trivia from you guys, gentlemen?
There was that one piece of behind the scenes trivia that, yes, it affects. When I read about it, it does bother me. But I don't think there was another option. It just speaks to the sickness of Iranian society at this point and throughout the last 40 years. But was what you brought up, Farhan, in the beginning of our discussion, was that actor that plays Bashu is just, despite being in what people call the best film of Iranian cinema, despite being the lead in that film, now his life is, it's
How do
despair.
people know that? Like, how is this so famously known? Because you're not the first person to say it, too.
Someone made a documentary, didn't they, where they like went looking for him?
Yeah, they did.
Shit. So this documentary was made, and
Yes.
we find out what happened to him?
Yes.
He was like homeless selling cigarettes on the road to get by.
I mean, who in Iran isn't homeless selling cigarettes on the road at this point?
So everybody
Yeah.
is, man. Like, we have the worst economy in like the worst inflation.
Yeah.
Above 40% of the population live under the line of poverty. Above 40%.
Yeah.
And I think that number, I read that like 3 or 4 years ago. So it could only be worse now.
There's also a difference between like being poor but having a house and being poor and living on the street selling cigarettes.
And also, let's keep it like, remember, addiction rates in Iran, I think, are one of the highest in the world.
Like hard narcotics, not just like...
Yeah, no. Like stuff that kills you, right? Like,
Yeah.
So I think that's another discussion, like, about where our society is right now inside the country, like...
Which especially to me, it's kind of like you see Bashu in this movie and he could have been headed in that direction. But then the movie is like, oh, this is what happens when you go out of your way to help someone and to save a life. And then when the movie's done, the poor kid essentially got abandoned.
Hey man, all of Iranian art has been abandoned inside
I
of
know,
Iran.
but I'm saying
it's not unique to this film.
But that flies in the face of the theme of the film. The theme of the film, they're poor, right? They're a poor family. The husband is like missing his limb. They're like barely affording to get by. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough money. The dad is already like, I don't know how we're going to be able to afford him. But the movie goes on to be like, look, we still got to go out of our way to help him.
Yes, and this was 30 years ago when people still could put food on their table.
Yeah.
Critical reactions. In the book Close Up by film journalist Hamid Dabashi, he describes the use of mythology in Beyzaie's films, saying, no one in the history of Iranian performing arts comes anywhere near Beyzaie's in his command of the Persian mythological culture and his ability to force it into creative convulsion.
But that's another point I was talking about earlier. Like, nobody can do it like that. With the mythology and literature that he draws on. I don't know if there's anyone else in Iran that understands and is as well versed in Iranian literature and mythology as Beyzaie is, that's currently living.
Kiarostami, as a contrast, is like he always focuses on factual evidence of the world, and like every ounce of metaphysical energy is sapped out of Kiarostami films. It's like he strips reality naked and is like, this is life in front of your eyes. This is exactly what it's like. He rests his case, right?
Yeah, it's like the other side of the coin.
Yeah, exactly. And Beyzaie's like, he works in the exact opposite. He challenges like mythos in the realm, and he engages its angelic. And like if there's angels and demons, demonic forces in the world, Beyzaie wants to bring that to the surface.
Yeah. What about, does Rasulov do it? Because I like the only one of his films I've seen was White Meadows, and he kind of builds his own mythology with White Meadows.
Rasulov doesn't do it the way Beyzaie does. I don't think he has that kind of a grasp on the mythology and lore and literature.
Yeah. I will say that was something about the film that I was super into.
Which
was like seeing essentially the messenger of death being there, like, you know what I mean? And eventually you find out it's a harbinger of joy. But also the exorcism, like seeing that in a movie, in an Iranian movie, was really cool to see, especially after, like you mentioned, Kaveh, so many of Kiarostami's movies were all about like natural realism.
Yeah.
It was really nice to see.
I just wanted to finish that quote by Dabashi. It says, Beyzaie cinema as a result becomes the mirror of the invisible world, the mythic challenge of the real, where all our enduring assumptions about the world disappear into thin air just before they make sure they remain law-abiding citizens of the Republic of Fear.
Wow.
That's a good quote, eh?
Yeah, that's incredible. Good find.
To quote Hamid Nafisi again, my man. Considering its wartime social context, the film retains a radicalism precisely because of its insistence of harmony among Iranian sub-ethnics, including Arab Iranians, at a time that the official policy of the Islamic Republic was to prolong the war with an Arab Iraq. This was a message not lost on the authorities, whose objections to the film apparently included its pacifism. They did not like Beyzaie being like, shouldn't we all just get along? I mean, he obviously wasn't being reductive, but
well, yeah. I mean, what this regime has done for the past like 40 something years is literally trying to display and pit people against each other from north to south of Iran based on their differences.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they really don't like that. They really want this like sort of monotone look, feel, culture, language to the country. And they really do not want to celebrate and praise the differences of the many peoples of Iran.
And that monoculture that they're going for is like not even really an Iranian culture. Because even when it comes to like old Iranian traditions, they also poo-poo that. They're like trying to create their own quasi-adaptation of like Islamic tradition and culture. And they're like, this is what the monoculture is. You know what I mean? And the Shah, especially with the White Revolution, the White Revolution was in a lot of rural Iran, in a lot of these different ethnic groups within Iran, was seen as a bad thing. And it was seen as like, oh, this is threatening to our cultures. Throughout our history, there's always been this bit of resistance between ethnic groups throughout Iran wanting to be unified together, and so many artists writing about how, no, we're all a part of the same family. We're all together. We're all of this land. And then you have a ruling class trying to push apart any kind of like
bonds
and be like, no, you're all my subjects. That's what unifies you.
Yeah, and dismissing the beautiful bonds that have literally kept these people together for thousands of years. Just belittling and dismissing those bonds, and almost coming up with an approach that makes those bonds non-existent. You know, which is one of the worst things that this ruling class has done to our people. Is tried so hard to separate them, you know, and pit them against one another.
Yeah.
Deeper analysis, where we break apart and pull away the themes and subtext of the film. Beyzaie said in an interview that it's crucial not to see censorship as merely political, but as a self-inflicted cultural damning that we impose on ourselves. To quote him, he said, "We struggle against our own culture. In societies that harbor a certain traditional image, any new kind of image is censored. They try to erase it. Censorship, in fact, means precisely upholding the stable and proper traditional image which they demand and exact from you. And as a result, they oppose any kind of change, provocation, suggestion. They won't tolerate it." He'd agreed with the interviewer who'd said that the depiction of Nai is that she is the new mythological construct of a woman, with which Beyzaie wishes to erase the image of women we have today in Iran.
Yeah, Beyzaie talks about that a lot, like self-imposed nonsense that we deal with on a day-to-day. Like, I think he even talks about like how like you know, a lot of these faults are brought on by ourselves and not an external force, right? And he does set to correct them, and I think that's why he's, you know, why he's so powerful for me, you know.
For me, this is why, for my deeper analysis, I really targeted on this, like the role of gender in film, like in Iran. I you know, the absence of the father in this story for 95% of the movie, he's gone. They, you know, the fact that Bashu and Nai sort of evolved to symbolically become parents of this household. They're both taking care of the chores. How most Iranian films would use children to talk about heterosexual relationships. They wouldn't be able to talk about it, so they put children in their films to like talk about more adult subject matter. So in a sense, you know, Bashu, it's not Freudian, but it's a little bit of like, it's talking about things you couldn't talk about, and reimagining what a woman's role is in society, and reimagining what, you know, this film is in my estimation, this is my breakdown of it. It's like talking about masculinity in Iran. Like, what is masculinity, and giving it a new image, a new way of looking at it.
And also, what is femininity? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
And also duality, how like it's kind of necessary for both, you know, to be within someone for for best results, like
Just going back to the depiction of women specifically, I love that she is shown as being this very powerful force. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she's the one selling things at the market. She's the one cooking and preparing things and running the
and she's the one standing up to the greater community.
Yeah, the greater
about
community.
Her decisions
she
in
kicks
life.
out an entire community. And I think it's also worth noting that like that community, that village, they're not just like random villagers. They're her family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like those are her cousins and her relatives, and she doesn't, just for the people who haven't seen the movie, she's not just like, everyone get out of my house. She like gets up and like physically grabs people and like shoos them and throws them out of the house. And she's very smart. She's very open. Like, I think it flies in the face of like what at the time the culture was saying, oh, a woman needs to be this and that and this and all this stuff. When it's like, no, that's not, like, this is a woman. A woman can be all of these things. She can be fierce. She can stand up for her family. She can stand up against her family. She can work in the field if she wants. She can sell things in the market. She can buy things at the market. She can haggle. She can hold her own. If someone screws her over, she knows how to assert her rights and to get that and to get justice, looking out for other people. I thought, and she's still like very much in love with her husband as well. And she's loyal to the husband. And when the husband comes back, she's loyal to him. And she also stood up to the husband when she felt that what he was saying was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it shows all these different aspects and attributes of what a person can be. And it really flies in the face of what the culture at the time was saying, or the government was saying at the time, what a woman ought to be.
Yeah. It's a reimagining of the role of men and women in society, and challenging the meaning of motherhood, patriarchy, family. Like, all of these things are being challenged to look in a new way, which is just, I mean, really awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It was really refreshing to see an Iranian movie tackle racism within the country, because it's something that a lot of Iranians don't want to talk about, but people will like make offhanded comments. Like, Iranians will make offhanded comments about other Iranians. They'll like see someone Baluchi and they'll be like, that person's not Iranian, or like that person looks Indian, or like they'll meet
or Afghan or from Khuzestan,
They'll see black Iranians and they'll be like, they're not really Iranian, all this stuff.
Well, yeah, but he does talk about the ignorance too, though, right? Because like, okay, so from the very north to the very south, there might be like an actual disconnect, and he shows that in I think with one of the first, I think it's in the first act of the movie, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but where she's literally trying to wash the black off his skin in the river, right? And I mean, for her, like, that's kind of displaying like that huge disconnect. Like, she's never seen a dark person in her village, in her world that doesn't exist, So, but yes, that's kind of a twofold. There's people that know and are, consciously racist, but for Susan Taslimi's character, I like that he shows that she's actually she doesn't know any better.
Yeah, there's a difference. There's a difference between her reaction to him and to meeting someone with dark skin for the first time, and the way that some of the other people in the village react. Because there's like a scene where like everyone in the village is coming up and being like every single person who walks by is like, look how black he is, look how black he is, look how black he is. But then with her, like you said, Rouzbeh, she just like didn't know like where his skin starts and where it's like dirt or whatever.
In their first encounter, Nai says, she does ask, are you an animal or human being, when she's seeing him through the trees? And that's like a first sign that it's a bit of a problematic thing, because she, like you said, Rouzbeh, she tries to wash him with soap, and after failing to do so, like, it won't come off. She's like, oh, he will never become white.
Yes.
She says that line. And it's not that she is a racist character as much as she's just a product of the village. Like, this is just, she shares the racism with the village, and she is rising above it from the outside. She's like, okay, so he's like not going to be white. And shortly after that, she like takes him on as her son. Like, she doesn't care beyond the fact that she's just ignorant to the fact that he's not white skinned. And then it's just, okay. I love him like a son. Whereas the rest of the village is like immediately drawn to that, and they won't let that go. They can't.
They won't let that go. Yeah, they can't. Yeah, there's still these people, like, you don't see a single television in this village.
There's no TV. Yeah.
There's obviously there's no internet.
Yeah.
The people of this village have never seen a world, and it's at a time where you could not have seen a world outside of your dwellings. Yeah, maybe she has actually never seen or heard of a dark person before, or if she has, it's been in stories about faraway lands.
Right. Yeah.
There was a reading, I can't remember if it's from Nafisi or Dabashi, but it's like there's a reading in this. I'm just changing course now on just deeper analysis that talks about how, remember the drum beat scene, the drumming scene when she's sick, Nai's sick and Bashu's drumming. The one reading was that is symbolically the birthing scene of him officially becoming her son. And that the beating is like her writhing around is like very similar to not only like the pain that a mother would go through while birth, but the way a fetus might be like trying to come out. And then in that very next scene, she's better. She's drying up her clothes, symbolically of like her clothes had been like wet or whatever, like she pregnancy. And that next scene is her having Bashu write the letter now. For the first time, she's not using the neighbor to write the letter. Bashu's writing the letter now. And she's saying, dictating to her husband, saying, by the way, as opposed to what you think, the neighbor's not writing this, because this is being written by my son, Bashu. And she refers to Bashu for the first time as son in that scene. And I thought that was a really interesting reading of like that becoming the symbolic moment of her giving birth symbolically to Bashu as her official kin. Wow. And I just thought that was a beautiful scene. A beautiful interpretation.
That's a great interpretation.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just like an exorcism ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a nice take, man.
I mentioned this earlier, but I'd love to get your takes on this. Multiple times when we see the ghosts of his family, it's always like in this village in Gilan. Usually they're like transposed here, but then he has that one village where it's almost like a memory where he sees himself with his whole family
in the sand.
In the sand, right? And then he sees Nai in that setting. And to me, it was almost like, oh, this is him finally opening up his world to Nai. This is like that point mentally where he wants to bring her into his life. But I was wondering what your reading was of that scene.
Yeah, I would take that as well. Yeah, I agree with that one.
Yeah,
because it is the only time we see it in the other way.
Yeah, I want to talk about the ending too. Can we break down the ending for deeper analysis?
Let's go.
So when the father appears, Bashu is seeing him. He doesn't know it's his father yet, like his now foster surrogate father. Nai's husband arrives in the village, coming back home, and he's standing next to a scarecrow that Bashu has built, and Bashu is literally sitting in his shadow, which is like already there's symbolism right there.
And the scarecrow is made with the husband's clothing, right?
Is with I think his jacket and
yes.
The thing I think interesting is like the scarecrow being a symbol of fear, but that there isn't anything there. It's literally a straw man, right? Like a straw man argument. And the father standing next to the scarecrow, he knows it's Bashu, that probably because it's the only like black kid in the village, but Bashu doesn't know that's the man yet, right? So then he goes back and he's told by someone that Nai's husband has returned, and he grabs a stick and he runs over and he positions himself in between Nai and the man with the stick, like threateningly, menacingly. And the way the camera's framed is you see from behind the father that there's a stump for the arm and Bashu's standing there. And it's like the balance of power has been shifted now. Like Nai is behind Bashu, being like kind of protected. And when this is the moment I teared up and like pretty much started crying. I couldn't help myself. He sees this man's been they've both been castrated in a sense. He's lost his arm. He's lost an appendage. Bashu's lost his family. And in this moment, he calls him son and he hugs him. And that moment he hugs him, I was torn apart because they just realized in that moment, they're both victims. I assume the guy was at war. I know it's never really clarified.
I think he was at war. Yeah.
He was at war.
Yeah, he's at war.
Okay, they do mention he's at war.
That's why he's missing his arm when he comes back.
It isn't until that moment that they realize they both lost something, and they're so much more similar than they are different. And that was the moment that I choked up because I was like, it's the turning point. It's the turning point of the whole film. It's like this man is not his enemy, and the fact that the man embraces him as a son, which is atypical from what you'd expect a patriarchal father figure might be doing in a situation like that, I wept. I just thought it was beautiful. Rouzbeh, can you expand on that? I feel like you're barely holding it together.
It also talks about the intergenerational damages of war as well. Yes, all the things that you said, yes, but also like intergenerational throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
This shit sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And all we have is each other's embrace in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So for me, it was like what you took away from it was very beautiful. And I can't say anything about it except for me. I think it was a little bit more literal. That scene, from what I remember, it was just like this thing like destroyed a lot of us as a people.
Yeah.
But you know, each other's embrace is where we're gonna heal.
Yeah. Farhan, and what did you take away from the ending? You were glad it was over. You're like, finally, this movie's
I mean, it's the same feeling I've had with a lot of the movie, that like there's beautiful moments in there, and and I love thematically what he's trying to say, but a lot of some technical problems I had with it were distracting me a little bit. Like, for example, we buy that he's missing an arm, but the way that they show that he's missing an arm is he has this like coat draped over the one shoulder, and he's like you just buy that he's missing an arm. And I know it's like, it's the smallest thing, but I have to like be honest, it was distracting to me. So like, just as I felt myself getting like emotionally invested in the scene, I'm like, oh, that's like, I have to buy that, I guess. And it just took me out of the moment. But I did really like the fact that like this guy comes home and like, we know that he's poor. He just went through a war, and he's like, who am I? And he's basically like, he's essentially like, I'm your dad.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was beautiful. And then we get to the boar stuff, and the way that the reveal of the boar I thought was a little weird. But then seeing them as a family chase off the boar was nice. So it was a lot of like up and down for me. A lot of like, this is great. Wait, what? This is great.
You missed another part where we understand he doesn't have a hand. An arm is when...
Well, he goes to put his hand out, and he can't shake it.
That's very like the imagery is there. And that's when he embraces Bashu, right?
Visually to the audience, you don't see that he has like a stump or whatever.
What more do you need?
I don't know, a stump. Like, give me like something.
But that's not what matters in that moment.
It matters to me. It matters to me. To me, as an audience member, when I was watching the movie, I'm telling you my experience, Rouzbeh. As I was watching the movie, and I see that that's
what you bump on?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's not an intentional thing, Rouzbeh. It's just my reaction to it while I'm watching it, and it's a valid reaction. It's a reaction that I had. I was watching the movie. There's no that's my reaction, Rouzbeh. You have your take on it. You have your reaction. I'm just expressing to you what happened and how I felt. I'm not ridiculous for defending myself here. I feel like Rouzbeh keeps like digging into me on all this shit, and I'm like, no, man. Like I'm entitled to have a different opinion. If you're gonna challenge me on this, you don't get to pretend like I'm the ridiculous one for having this position.
I just can't fathom how in that moment you want to see a stump.
I don't want to see a stump.
That's what I can't understand.
That's not the point.
But you just said I want to see a stump. You said I want to see a stump.
No, you're because
yes, you did. You said I want to see a stump.
Because you said what else would you want to see, and I'm like, I guess a stump.
But that's ridiculous.
Maybe don't have it be his arm if you can't practically show without being like, oh, here's like a student film solution to this problem. Maybe don't do that.
I've seen war amputees in Iran.
Yeah.
They don't walk around with their stumps. There's usually a shoulder on their jacket.
Yeah, but he doesn't look like he's missing an arm with his jacket over it. He looks like he has an entire arm under that jacket.
I mean, not that anyone wants my opinion, but I never thought once about what was under that jacket.
Same.
And that's,
never.
Listen, that's just as valid. That's just as valid. I was just expressing the reaction that I had to seeing it, and then I got put on blast. And I don't think that that's fair.
Who put you on blast?
Nobody put you. You're putting yourself on blast.
Roll the tape.
I just asked what would you rather see there.
Roll the
That's
tape.
all I asked.
This whole goddamn review, I'm like, if I'm giving an opinion that's slightly different, I'm just being like put on blast. And when I defend myself, I'm the ridiculous one.
I haven't said anything about your reviews.
This is true.
Best scene. Rouzbeh, what's your favorite scene in the movie?
I have two favorite scenes. One is the iconic scene, which I'm sure some of your listeners and maybe even you two might agree is is that scene where they're trying to figure out each other's languages. Like, we call this a doll. What do you call this? I mean, that scene, when a lot of the times when I hear the name of the movie, like, my mind goes to that scene, is them trying to communicate, him and Bashu and Nai. Yeah. But also another scene I loved, which ends in a really, it ends violently, but it's when the kids are getting along and dancing, when Bashu is like singing to the crops and playing music for the crops. And then it shows again the commonality, the northern kids are doing their dance to encourage the growth of crops, and Bashu is doing his song and dance. It does end up in a quarrel, and Bashu gets beaten by them, and then Nai comes in. But those two scenes are very iconic for me.
Of those two, which one is your favorite?
I would have to go with the communication scene between Bashu and Nai.
Yeah, that's my favorite as well. It was such a like sweet and tender moment. It was shown really beautifully. Like the composition was great. The acting in that scene was excellent, and you can really feel the sincerity between the two of them as they're communicating. And it was also nice to know that like, oh, her kids are also watching their interaction. You know, and through that they're learning that, hey, this guy's pretty cool.
For me, it was the last scene. Everything from the scarecrow and meeting the father till the credits, I was edge of my seat, full of emotion, couldn't look away. I just thought every line of dialogue, it was beautiful. Like, it was such a masterclass in denouement of a film. Like, everything's building to the moment of this man returning and what that's going to mean for everyone. And I just was blown away. I just loved it. So that final scene, I mean, it's not a scene, but it's like from the scarecrow to the end, just the strongest.
What was your expectation of the dad's return? Did you think he was going to come and accept him, or did you think he was going to come and refuse him?
The latter, because just my assumption on what male patriarchal role models are at the time, and the way he's responding in the letters, you know, like he's giving his response. He hears about this kid. He's like, what do you know, how do you think that's going to make me look? You know, there's an implication from the father's perspective that if people see you with this child, everyone's going to assume you cheated on me, right? Like, that's part of the underlying fabric between all this is you're going to have this black child. I was gone. Obviously, he's much older, but like, if we have this child, we raise this child 10 years from now, we're going to see these two kids that are mine and this other kid that's a black kid. Everyone's going to be like, oh, she cheated on him behind the back. That's not the father, you know? So that's, you know, all this underpinning of that is like, how can you accept this kid? We don't even have the mouth to feed. We don't have the money for this. We don't have this stuff. You're expecting him to come back and just be rejecting on every possible level of this.
If I remember correctly, that because I've seen this a few times, the first time I watched the movie, if I can recall correctly, I didn't expect the dad to return. I thought it was going to be a tragic ending.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that's what I expected too.
Now Bashu has to like step into that role.
Yeah,
but you know, taking on an orphans of war. I mean, that was a pretty common practice, I think, during the war. It was some groups of people. It was revealed to me years after the war that my dad's sister actually had a house full of war orphans that she raised until they were able to, you know, until they were of age to like be on their own and whatnot. But she didn't even tell anyone. Like, she didn't even tell us about it. But it was later revealed. So I think that was like, I think people did that.
All right, least favorite scene.
You go first.
I'll go first, sure. It's really hard for me to pick a least favorite scene. I ended up just going with the first time he walks away from the bazaar, because he disappears from the family twice in the movie, right? The second one makes total sense for me, script-wise, because he overhears the letter being read by the father saying, we can't raise another kid. What are you thinking? He overhears that. He's like, I'm not welcome here, and runs. That made sense. The previous time to that is when he leaves from the bazaar. And it's because, again, he sees another ghost of his mother for a moment. But he's been seeing the ghost of his mother, so it's not like he actually thinks she's there. He kind of just like leaves, and he turns down the alleyway and says bye to the family and leaves. And I didn't quite understand what the impetus was to leave in that moment. I was just a little confused. Again, I'm just sort of like grasping at straws here in terms of least favorite scene because I loved the movie. But that's it. That was it for me. And maybe, Rouzbeh, do you have any clarification on what that was about? Like, why does he leave in that scene?
I almost think it's imposter syndrome.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, and a sort of shame, embarrassment, like almost like a confusion as well. Like, what is actually going on in this moment? What am I doing here? This is not this is not my thing, but here I am stepping up. I think there's a lot of conflict in his mind when he runs there.
What about you? What's you got a least favorite?
The scene that made me feel like the ickiest was when she's washing him.
Yeah.
I was just like, you feel it. You're like, oh, stop,
Yeah.
Paranjun.
Mine is the same as yours, Kaveh. And I went back and I rewatched it, and I was like, there was a lot of nitpicks I have with the movie, and we'll get to it.
No.
But as a scene, like as a whole scene, being like, wait, what? It was definitely that one where he leaves the market, because he's with Nai and the kids, and they're like having a good time. He's like, oh yeah, that guy's ripping you off, all this stuff. And she's like bargaining to get a discount on a shirt that she's trying to buy for him. And he like starts just noticing everyone else in the market. And then to himself, he's like, God be with you. And then he turns around and sprints away. And then he yells, God be with you. And I was like, oh, this blocking is rough. The decision to run away is weird. Like, I didn't understand or see like what led to it. Maybe because it like cuts to a lot of different people's faces and people speaking Gilaki, that maybe he was like, oh, I don't belong here. That's the only thing I can think of, especially because when they first go to the market, everyone keeps walking by and they're like, look how black he is.
Damn, That's Poetry, where we discuss our favorite quotes from the film.
I like the when he starts reading out of that book. I don't know. That gave me the shivers. All children of Iran. I love that line.
Iran سرزمین ماست. ما از یک آب و خاک هستیم. ما فرزندان ایران هستیم.
Yeah, that was mine as well. So I ended up writing a backup one because I figured that would happen. My backup one is early on in the movie when the truck driver leaving the chai khune, the tea house. As he's leaving, people are like, can you give us a ride out of here? You want to get out of here, all this stuff. And Bashu is hiding in the back of his truck. And he goes, we don't take passengers, we don't smuggle goods, and we don't smuggle passengers. And in Farsi especially, I think that like the play on words there was really clever, and I like that a lot.
For me, it's a little bit of a longer one. There's a few great moments. Like I mentioned before, when Nai's writing the letter saying, I didn't go to our neighbor, this was written by my son, Bashu. Really powerful. But the first moment I got chills was 23 minutes into the film when Bashu first monologues to the mom in his language, in Arabic.
Oh, yeah.
And essentially, I'm going to like run through it pretty quickly and then we'll put the quote up too. But I come from far away. I don't know where I am. Is this still Iran or another land?
أنا جيت من طرق بعيد. ما أدري وين جيت. إحنا إيران يوم مو إيران.
I don't understand your language. I was somebody for myself. I'm not a grown-up yet, but I have parents. My sister was just your size.
أنا ما أفتن لسانكم. أنا كنت شخص لنفسي. ماني كبير. لكن حضر في أم وأبوي كنت. أختي وماني كانت بقدك.
Oh God, what's happened? I woke up one morning. I was hungry. Father got up for breakfast. The floor moved, and there's a car splitting noise. Mom prayed. I couldn't hear her.
يا رب صار علينا. أنا فزيت من النوم. بداية الصبح كان. وكنت يوعان. أبوي قام من الصفرة. والصفرة مشت. والقاع مبطت. وذانات الطورشة. أمي اندعت. وأنا ما أسمع دعاء.
Black smoke was everywhere. My sister was lost in the smoke. Mom caught fire and burned. Dad's arms flew in the sky, but he sank in the earth.
وأنا ما أشوف من الدخان. أختي ماماني كانت بقدك. بالدخان تحت. أمي احترقت. كلها احترقت. أبوي شال يدي للسماء ونزل بالأرض. يا رب صار علينا.
I ran to school. Our teacher was crushed between walls. Why don't you take Bashu? Now they're looking for me in the other world. I'm left alone.
وركضت صوب المدرسة ولقيت المعلم مدفون بالطابوق. يا رب ليش ما أخذت باشو؟ ربي أستهلك ذيك الدنيا خمون علي وأنا ظليت وحيد.
I had chills. But especially with what's happening in the world right now too. It was just like so poetically, eloquently, desperate. The desperation in his voice, and it's like a monologue. That was a tough one. Rouzbeh, I can see you're affected too, just by hearing my thespianic performance of it.
Brilliant performance.
Yeah,
we got to cast Kaveh. We got to take advantage of his beautiful delivery.
Hey,
before someone else does.
Favorite performance, This might be. I mean, it's actually interesting. We might not have the same. I had Nai Susan Taslimi. The actor playing Bashu is fantastic, but I just think like the film isn't the same if Susan isn't pulling the weight that she is from first time you see her eyes till the end. It's just Susan.
She's the best.
Absolutely destroyed. Yeah,
I would agree with that. She is the movie. Like, I mean, a lot of things are the movie, but her performance is this movie. I would dare to say this is her best performance I've ever seen.
I'm really excited to see her in other things.
Yeah, she's fantastic all around, but none of her, like all her other performances are incredible, but I don't think any of them have stuck with me like this performance has.
Yeah, it was great.
So yes, all around?
Yeah.
Agreement? Nitpicks, hot takes, and what aged poorly. Farhan, the floor is yours. Now is the time to say all the things you've been saying through every other section.
I made a list.
I mean, just don't
I'll
mention
condense it.
every
I'll condense it.
Just like
For me, the like a big part of it was a lot of the blocking in the film. Like blocking, for those who don't know, it's kind of the visual direction of going from point A to point B. In a lot of ways, that's like the simplest way to put it. Feels very theatrical in the sense of it's like, oh, this is how you would direct people on a stage. And this director comes from a theater background, so that makes sense. Just me watching this movie, sometimes the way that people would move somewhere, or all of a sudden 5 people would move into one spot together, or like something would fly in from out of frame, things like that really bumped me, and it reminded me that I was watching a movie. And if the whole movie was like stylized like that, let's say, for example, Wes Anderson, everything is stylized like that. Like everything is like surrealist in the way that it's shown, the blocking. But this movie, it was like trying to do both. It was trying to have these like really beautiful shots where it's like, oh wow, and then everyone comes here together, or this thing goes over here, and all of a sudden this person falls over or whatever. But then it's intercut with very realistic portrayals of people, and that felt a little off to me. A lot of my complaints with the movie was a matter of like, this is too refined, tone it back 10%.
Okay, valid, fair, valiant effort. I don't know. Rouzbeh, nitpicks, hot takes, anything aged poorly for you?
No. I'm not about to pick apart Beyzaie. I just can't. I can't. Like, there's not, for me, it's like, I don't know. This is as best as it got in Iranian cinema.
I would say in terms of what aged poorly, like, it's worth debating, like, is the film racist? Not in is Beyzaie racist, and not is like the film a racist film, but there are like depictions of the way villagers react to a black child. It makes me uncomfortable. And like you mentioned, like you get Iki Rouzbeh watching that scene where she's trying to wash the black off the child. Like that stuff is it's not easy watch. I will say one little funny nitpick I had is the boar. The first time you see the boar, it very clearly seemed like a stuffed boar on like a skateboard or like a wooden plank with wheels. And you just seeing it drag, and the way it's shot, it's just like a very stiff, like taxidermied boar just like moving through the woods. So I was like, oh, that's really funny. The fact that he goes on the skateboard, I laughed and chuckled, but my reaction to it and things like that in those moments, I actually find those things quite endearing in movies. I don't particularly have any problem with it. Because I know that the limitations of whatever like filmmaking, there's just I just thought something like that was really quite charming. So what I was going to say about that was it's a nitpick of how nakedly obvious the boar is a stuffed boar, but I actually really enjoyed it because to me it doesn't take me out of the moment at all. In fact, it makes me a greater. I think the film it imbues the film with more charm.
So you don't want to see the George Lucas special edition version?
No, I don't.
Where a CGI boar wipes the screen.
Tauntaun shows up.
or like growls at the camera, and then the lens goes in its mouth and comes out the other end.
Double feature lineup. What would this make a great? If you're curating a film, a double feature film, and you got this film, what would be the one you'd pair this up with? I'll go first because I gave this some thought. And I'll go a little bit into elaboration when I talk about Hollywood remakes, but I would think of a film like Jojo Rabbit, because Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi, it's a young boy as your main lead who's been displaced in a manner of speaking, not like because he's with his mom.
Well, the girl's displaced.
she's displaced, but like
She's the Bashu.
I know I don't want to ruin it, but like, yeah, sure, she's displaced. It's as a result of war too, right? It's a result of a war that neither of the children have control over. So it's like your leads are child actors displaced due to war. That was my thing. But I have a list of other films that I'll just say that are very similar. But my thing would be Jojo Rabbit and Bashu.
That's a really good one, and I'm upset I didn't think of that.
Thank you. Rouzbeh.
I don't know why my mind goes to Bicycle Thief.
Oh yeah, okay, interesting.
Italian neorealism film.
Yeah.
It's about an unemployed guy who finally finds work. The work posters, actually. It's a war-torn Rome at the time. I think it's post-war Rome.
Yeah.
And his wife sells like the family stuff. Well, he gets his bicycle stolen, and his wife is selling like the family stuff to retrieve the bicycle because the guy needs it for work. I don't know why my mind went to Bicycle Thief, but I just think they would pair really well together.
No, I would see that because it's like it's not it's father son where this is mother son relationship during war torn a country that's war torn, but also that film Bicycle Thief specifically has, and I won't spoil it, the last line of that movie, if you remember what it was, specifically referring to a moment of stealing a bicycle, is so powerful that I remember thinking like, this is what the whole theme of the film is. Like, this is the moment. It's such a heartbreaking line. And it's kind of does that. It imbues that same feeling that you get from this film where it's just like, this is the culmination of the entire film takes you to this moment.
They feel similar to me. I don't know. There's some.
Yeah, I hear that. That's a good call. Baranjun.
I picked two just depending on the audience. Like if you're showing it to kids, then I would pair it with Fox and the Hound. Mostly because you have this, like the mother figure, the relationship between like the mom and the fox. It's more about the relationship between the mom and the fox, less so about the relationship with the fox and the hound. But just this idea of this woman taking this orphan child and raising the child in an environment that's hostile to that child. And you can show different aspects of that, right? With Bashu, you can show the effects of that on the immediate family, and then you show Fox and the Hound, and you can show the effects of that on the surrounding. Once it's been integrated into the family, what is the reality of that child like as it sets out to meet other people, or in the case of Fox and the Hound, other animals? And then in the case of if you're showing it to adults, I would actually show it with To Kill a Mockingbird. And the storyline is not at all the same, but I think thematically touching on the notions of racism and this person of a totally different race in this society that's like primarily white or light skinned, especially the fact that To Kill a Mockingbird was like seen as the first serious commentary on that in a mainstream way in American society. And Bashu is the first commentary on racism that I've seen, like pan-Iranian racism in Iranian cinema. And I would love to invite like a panel of experts on these subjects and do a Q&A with the audience on the way in which that was explored in the film. Like, where does it do well? Where do each of these movies do well? And where are they problematic?
Great. Can this be a modern Hollywood remake? Rouzbeh, I'm assuming you'd say no.
I would say no. You assumed right.
But can I just challenge you? Like, let's just say a major Hollywood studio is now they're going to give you a lot of money. They want you have creative control, but they just want a modern remake of this movie. You're acting as producer, writer, and director. So you're making all the creative choices. Well, how would you approach it? If you don't, they're going to hand it to Michael Bay.
Okay, well, I would, if it's a modern movie, I would then just take the story and sort of find a modern war to kind of
there's so few to choose from now.
I know there's not much of that happening ever. But I would actually change the location, and adapt it to modern situations. Because again, like I think Bashu talks about a very specific moment in time that I think, it did its job. Now, if we want to tell this story again, let's find a very modern, current war that we could, sort of show the effects of war and racism, because that doesn't exist either, right?
Yeah.
Anymore. In present day. That's how I would do it. I would change. I would adapt it to present day.
Yeah. That's great. Farn, can this be a Hollywood remake?
I don't want to see a Hollywood remake, but I would love to see a remake of this script, just with like modern sensibilities, maybe. Or if you want to make it like slightly different, so you're not like this is basically the same movie. Set it like make a period piece version of this set in like during the time of the Anglo-Persian War.
For this, I'd say, can this be a Hollywood remake? I say yes, and in fact, there are versions of this story already. Fish Out of Water, stories of orphan children finding new families, living a type of life they know nothing about. Here's a short list, all of which can be also double feature lineups. Annie, Hugo, Oliver Twist, The Book Thief, Stuart Little, Les Miserables, Lion, Hunt for the Wilder People, The Jungle Book, James and the Giant Peach, The Blind Side, for sakes, Cider House Rules, Great Expectations, Man of Steel, and fucking Elf.
Hey, I brought up Zack Snyder and you got mad at me.
I'm saying that these have been these are the same orphan stories, orphans finding new homes, living a type of thing. Elf too, I thought was a funny reference. Could be like because that kid's fish out of water, orphan finding new family.
Yeah.
So this has been done. This goes back to my sense of that, like it's pretty tale as old as time. So yes, it can be done.
But what if it was this story?
Yeah, like I think this story would be successful as a remake.
How would you do it? How would you, Kaveh Mohebi, are handed $20 million to remake this movie?
I'd give it to Rouzbeh, to be honest, to direct. I feel like nobody's more passionate right now.
Yeah, I would.
Or the director.
I would probably also give it to Rouzbeh, even in the scenario where it's like you get the same script, same location, same setting, redo it, or it's a period piece now set in the 1800s.
Or get a Black Iranian director like Alex
Alex,
Eskandarkhah.
And Alex is also Shomali too.
Yeah, so
Like his dad is from northern Iran.
Get a Black Iranian film director.
That's what I said.
A black woman Iranian female.
Iranian.
Oh.
Yeah. Like Priscilla.
Sorry, Alex.
Final thoughts and grades. I'm gonna give my grade first, then I'll close with my final statement. But I give this an A. It's somewhere between A and an A plus, but I don't think I've given an A plus to anything yet.
You have not.
I think A has been my highest grade I've given any movie, and I would give this an A. It matches the highest grades I've given thus far. Solid A. Really nothing for me to pick apart about this film. So that's my grade.
Yeah, I again, my favorite Iranian movie of all time. Yeah, I would give 100. For me, again, subjective. Art is subjective. Farhan, you can argue with me till the cows come home, and I can argue with you till the cows come home. But again, it's all subjective. Yeah, I would give it a flawless A++.
Oh, A++.
Yeah.
Not one flaw. Damn. Okay. I praise this movie for its representation of women, for tackling racism within Iran, which to this day Iranians don't like to talk about. Its commentary on the unity of Iranian ethnic groups and pan-Iranian identity, the mythological references and invocation. There's a lot of very beautiful shots and moments, but at the same time, I don't like the way that a lot of these things are stitched together. And a lot of the issues that I have with the way that certain things are blocked felt a little contrived. And those really took me out of the moment. And to be honest, when I first came up with a grade for this movie, it was like insultingly low. And through the conversation with you guys, I've actually bumped it up a little bit. And you're probably still not going to like the grade that I give it. But ultimately, I was pulled out of the movie enough times that it severely hampered my enjoyment of it. Full disclosure, I've only seen the movie once. I was very tired when I saw the movie, so I'll watch it again. It's very possible that I will have a similar experience to this that I did with Social Network, where it went from being one of my least favorite movies to one of my favorite movies. But for now, I'm giving this movie a C.
Is that higher or lower than your Prince of Persia grade?
It is higher.
What was your Prince of Persia grade?
It was a D++. It's lower than my Holy Spider grade, though.
Okay, so what was your previous, like, what if you our conversation bumped it up to a C from a C minus or C
From a D.
from a D? Great.
So that means that the Cinema Rex Average score for Bashu is A-.
That's another reason I had to bump it up to A++. I didn't know there was an A++, but I knew that there was an average because I've been on this show before. So I was like, I'm going to give this the highest score.
Bashu, the Little Stranger. A simple human touching Iranian film about a 10-year-old boy whose family is killed when the Persian Gulf is bombed by Iraq. To once again quote Hamid Dabashi, Beyzaie's cinema like Bashu becomes the mirror of the invisible world, the mythic challenge of the real, where all our enduring assumptions about the world disappear into thin air just before they make sure they remain law-abiding citizens of the Republic of Fear. This film came at a time so painfully near to the war that it's depicting that its allegories need not be more than skin deep, but yet resonate through their lyrical mythology to heighten the emotional impact. Themes of disruption and displacement caused by war were widespread in Iranian cinema at the time. Look no further than Bashu and visions of his mother to see echoes of Iran's time and place in the late 80s. War-ravaged citizens were failing to return to normalcy, and the failure to locate and to bury the missing turned the disappeared and the dead into powerful presences in cinema, haunting the living, disrupting their thoughts, dreams, and lives. This is a film that wants to speak of Iran's diversity, its multilingual, multi-ethnic culture, at a time when an all-out war was demanding a sense of homogeneity. A film with nuanced gender representation through the absence of a male-headed family in a world that was becoming increasingly patriarchal. For these reasons, we praise Beyzaie for having such a radical, outspoken voice, one that flourishes with mythology across a timeless canvas. Rouzbeh, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rouzbeh.
I want to thank you both for inviting me back on this show. I love the show, and I love you too. So
Love you too.
I can't imagine how the debates would have gone without you. It would have been a completely different podcast, and I'm glad you were here for it.
Yeah, thanks for your final appearance on the show, Rouzbeh. It's too bad we can't have you back on next time. I'm just joking.
wow.
I'm joking. Okay, we're just gonna pause the podcast here and bring in some insight from Alex Eskandarkhah from the.
Wait a minute. We're pausing it. We're gonna do this in the middle, or
No, at the end.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I thought pause makes it sound like we're gonna just midway through the podcast.
All right. I'm sorry. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We're going to bring in Alex Eskandarkhah from the Collective for Black Iranians. He was on the last episode of the podcast as well. He's a Rosie Award-nominated Iranian-Canadian director, producer, writer, entrepreneur, actor, and co-founder of the Collective. And he's produced over 100 episodes of the Gifted Gap podcast. And he recently created an hour-long documentary called Coaching While Black, which premiered at the Calgary International Film Festival. Alex, thank you so much for coming back on such short notice. Let's talk about Bashu.
Thank you for having me.
You know what's really funny, Alex?
What's that?
First of all, thank you for coming back on the show.
Anytime.
It's been a long time. Literally been the last time. I remember specifically during the Taste of Cherry podcast, we were talking about how I specifically said, I think you guys echoed it for the most part. I'm like, I can't even think of any Black Iranians on screen in Iranian cinema. And then the very next episode, we did Bashu, which I'd never seen before. I'm like, oh, literally, the very next movie I watch stars a Black Iranian in the lead, in the title role of a movie.
And not only that, but he's from the same province as your mom, and the movie takes place in the same province as your dad.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I totally forgot about that film. Wow. The Little Stranger.
So did you make this movie? It seems very personal. Jay, you made a beautiful film, man.
Well, thank you. No, but it wasn't me, unfortunately.
Well, we had Rouzbeh on. We had Rouzbeh on for the Bashu podcast, and a lot of the talk about the film was...
He loves that film.
He loves that film. He very much loves it. I loved it, too. I mean, all three of us, Farhan actually loved it more than all of us, I think we could say, right? He had no qualms with it whatsoever.
I was quite critical of it.
There might have been a Zack Snyder reference or two in there. But I think we were all really impressed with how that film speaks to diversity within Iran, where somebody can go from the south of Iran to the north of Iran and the world could look so different from its culture, its people, its landscapes, that Bashu, when he first gets there, actually doesn't even know whether or not he's still in Iran because the language is different, because the people look different. And it's a film that I think celebrates diversity within Iran. And we just thought that there was a lot of interesting points we had brought up that you might have had a much more detailed, insightful outlook on, specifically because of your work with the Collective for Black Iranians, you as a Black Iranian director, filmmaker, writer, artist, etc. So take it away. I hope you've seen the movie recently.
I think the last time I watched the film was, I want to say like this time last year. And that was I think my second time watching it. And, you know, I think it's a great film, but I also think that very critical of it. You know, I think the plot is similar to, you know, the story of a lot of Iranians of, you know, escaping the war, the Iran-Iraq war in the South, you know. But at the same time, I had a weird feeling after watching it. And it wasn't a very comfortable feeling, you know, knowing what I know and being conscious of it. I felt like the main character, Bashu, lacked agency in the film. I felt like he was a very passive character. He didn't have, he just didn't have agency, and the way he was depicted in certain scenes, and I think is a trend. It was actually interesting because I spoke with my mother about this. You know, most times, I think every instance of Black Iranians that we see on screen in Iranian cinema are always in a negative connotation. Not in the sense of negatively represented, like, oh, they're bad people, but more so like they just don't have any agency. They don't have any freedom. Bashu in that film, same thing. You know, he ends up doing a lot of the chores, and he ends up being he's treated differently being up in Gilan. And also, like, you know, my dad's from Chaluz, but his parents are from Gilan, you know. And then my mom's family is from Abadan. So there's this neat intersection of my identities that take place in this movie. But I found that I think it was well intended, but it didn't come off the way I think it was meant to come off. I also think it didn't age well with how things have moved forward. And since then, you know, I haven't seen too many, maybe one or two other instances of Black Iranians being represented in Iranian cinema, but it's never in like an empowering or thought-provoking light, you know. So that's what was really critical. And then cinematic-wise, I mean, you know, it was good storytelling. I would have made some different choices camera-wise in a lot of the scenes and stuff. But overall, I think it is a great film, and I think it speaks to you know, our diversity in Iran. But I just think it could have been executed in a different light, you know. And there's, you know, a lack of consciousness, a lack of agency, a lack of nuance. It lacks a lot of nuance, you know, and people who would watch this would have a lot of questions, I think, rather than answers, which is also good and bad.
So when you mentioned you felt a little uncomfortable after watching the film, you don't just mean in terms of like, oh, seeing what he went through made me feel uncomfortable. You're also talking about the way in which the movie was made and presented, like as a movie, like the decisions made by the filmmaker, that also made you feel uncomfortable.
No, I'm strictly speaking about Bashu's character. The film itself was okay.
Sorry, Bashu's character, like the things that he goes through as if he was a real person, or you're saying the creative decisions behind Bashu as a character?
Both, because he lacks agency. He lacks, you know, there's no strong, like, what's his want in the film? You know, like, what are we, to go back home? Well, no, that's not his want, right? To want to fit in. You know, there's no journey for him. You know, it's almost as if he's just stuck in that Gilaki town. And, like, you know, that kind of was, I think there's a lot of stories about chosen migration, escaping that war, you know. But yeah, the representation of him was lacked agency, lacked nuance. You know, obviously we know Black people. I don't know at that point if people knew that there was a Black people in the South, right? I think we talked about it last on the other podcast. Like, people who are in Iran don't really know that there's so many more ethnicities in the South. And I just think it lacked that context. I think the context of the war and all that was good, but you know, a lot of people forget that, you know, Abadan, Khorramshahr, like these places were some of the most popular tourist destinations in Iran before the war. They were never revitalized. A lot of it's still Dahun, like from the war. And here's this kid, this character, escapes the war, ends up in Gilan, where they're talking a different language. They're making fun of him. You know, there's a lot of like, and he himself lacks that ability or freedom to escape that situation as well, you know, even though he escaped the first one. And so, like I said, I think it was well intended, and there's some creative choices I would have made that were differently. But I do believe it's a must watch for Iranian cinema. I think every Iranian person should watch this film. I think every non-Iranian person should watch this film. But the problem is, I think that in Iranian cinema, we lack a film where this group of people, my people, have a story that we can root ourselves in and say, okay, yeah, that we're adequately represented in this film, you know? I also don't think it's just an inclusion thing. It's also a storytelling thing. And we haven't really had that agency ourselves to tell our own stories of you know, whether it's escaping a war, culture, those kind of things. Maybe I gotta give it another watch.
If you were to give this movie a grade, what grade do you think you would give it?
I think I'd give it a B-.
B-. Okay.
It's not a bad film. You know, it's not a bad film. It's just, I think a lot of the there was a lack of critical thinking when it was being made. But at the time, I think it probably was praised, still is praised. But it's just about the themes and the character himself I have qualms with.
That might be also a product of the time it came out. If you look at 1989 American cinema, even forget the fact that this movie's made in Iran by Iranians, you'd have movies that are incredibly outdated, racist,
From 89.
bad depictions of Black people. You know, there's like a 1986 comedy called Soul Man. Have you ever heard of that movie?
Never watched
About a
it.
college student who can't get into university,
I
so
know this movie,
he goes in blackface to get into like a university under like some diversity program. It's a 1986 comedy, and the whole thing is like, isn't it wacky that he's going in blackface? It's insanely racist. It's like a Hollywood, like A-tier, like Hollywood studio film that came out. And so there's an element of it being a product of the fact that this came out in 1989. But I also have a question for you around this idea, and this is going to sound, at the risk of sounding incredibly reductive, do you think this movie is racist? And before you answer, and I know that encapsulates a lot, but when Beyzaie depicts these characters, for example, the mother who sees that he's dark-skinned, so he wants to wash it off with soap, and then she realizes he cannot be washed off. It's his skin. He's not dirty. It's his skin color. She's like, well, she loves him anyways. And in one level of thinking, it's not that she's a racist mother. It's she's an ignorant from a small village. She's uneducated. She doesn't know this world. And these people don't know much more than what they've seen. And if this is an honest depiction of people from those villages, my question to you then is Beyzaie being insensitive as a filmmaker, or is he depicting a truth of how these people would react, and therefore it's due to their ignorance and lack of education and understanding that they behave this way? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do believe the film comes off racist because you got to understand, you know, when you're depicting these things, I believe it is a reality, but I also believe it is traumatizing, you know, for Black kids that are, you know, if a Black kid was to watch that and see that on screen, right?
Yeah.
That's going to make them feel uncomfortable. That's going to make them feel a type of way. It's the same thing as, like, you know, a kid walking in. Well, I have memories of me walking into Iranian supermarkets with my dad when I was young, I'm walking in and I'm seeing blackface, you know, like no matter what the intention was, I think when we're thinking about these things, we got to think about how people on the other side are receiving these images, you know, and that's one of many images in the film that's kind of like cringy, like cringy. Yeah. It kind of was cringy. Even though that's, like you guys said, that is the reality of these people in these small towns. They don't know. They haven't seen Black people before. And this is probably how most people would react. But like I said, I just think that, you know, our character, Bashu, just feels like just in passing, right? He's not given any.
He feels like a device.
Yeah, like a prop almost to show Iranians' ignorance or lack of, you know, knowledge on this matter. And I just feel, you know, and like you said, maybe it is a product of the time, right? Where maybe people weren't really, you know, thinking about these things. But, you know, we're looking at this film in 2024, right? And I think, you know, we got to remain critical.
No, I agree. I'm not even arguing the opposite. I'm just genuinely interested in your insight.
Yeah. That's how I feel. And I think we just need more, like more stories from, I think the agency is put back when, you know, Black people are telling those kind of stories, because those are nuances and traumas and things that Black people understand, you know, more than a white passing Iranian filmmaker. I understand the intention, and I think it was well intended. I don't think he meant any maliciousness by this film. I just think it came off a type of way.
It's funny because in our when we did our section on could this be a Hollywood remake, we mentioned how if we were going to see a Hollywood remake version of it, we would want a Black director to make it. And we all landed on you being the perfect director to make a remake of this, because your family's from the specific village
or province. Yeah.
You're a Black Iranian director. So if we can raise the money for a Bashu remake, you're at the helm, man. You're going to be in charge.
I would take a stab at
it. Yeah, perfect. Cool. I mean, I don't have any other specific questions. He's very insightful on this stuff. So I don't know if you do.
No more questions. Thanks for jumping on it. Such a short notice, Alex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm willing to drop everything to talk shop about films. So, you know, can't wait to listen to this one. Listen to the next one. Got some exciting stuff coming. So shout out Cinema Rex.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Farhan, you know how I feel about you.
Unfortunately, I do. Kaveh, thank you very much for everything.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and be'omid didar.
Bye.
Music for Cinema Rex was written and performed by Sohail Sadinejad.